The Robert Guillaume show. Now that was a very interesting show.
Did you like it?
I liked the show. I thought it was very interesting for the time that it was because there was that interracial relationship thing that came into play. Tell us a little bit about that show and the controversy around it.
Well, we didn't really get a chance to get into controversy because we made 13, and I'm not sure they ran all 13 of them. And the show itself, I consider it a big, I won't say mistake, but it wasn't as well thought out in reality as it was in my mind. In my mind, I had all kinds of things that I thought ought to work. And it was my idea of how to make a show, and again, stay away from stereotypical nonsense. But it didn't work.
Well, it was before its time because that was during the time when you did see some movement towards interracial relationships, but it was very controversial back then. And at that time, I believe that there was not an interracial couple on television that had kissed. Where I think there had been one or two or something like that, and it was a big deal. So it was real touchy. It's something that would work today, but back then, you were just going into new territory.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah. Your last show, Sports Night. Tell us a little bit about that show. How did that come? How did it come about for you to be on that show? And
I'm not sure how it came about. I had met some people who were in the show who, I think when my name was brought up, rooted for me to the writer, Sorkin. I think that's how I got the show. But it was to me, a show which was something that I pursued. The idea of playing a character who was not necessarily black. I don't know whether it makes all that much sense today. Because that's, what is that, a few years ago now? Only a few years ago. And I thought it was a wonderful show that just never got a chance. He's a wonderful writer.
now you had your stroke when you were
Doing that show.
doing that show. And from what I understand, you didn't know you had had a stroke.
Yeah, well, I kind of stupid. Yeah, I came in one morning. When I awoke the morning of the stroke, something didn't seem right, but I had no idea of what it might be. And my routine had been to take my daughter to school, my daughter Rachel to school, come back by Jerry's Delicatessen, get some breakfast, shoot the breeze with the guys. And then go to work. But when I got there, me see, what did I do that morning? I've forgotten.
You came in to get with the guys and started telling jokes.
Oh yeah, and everything was going along well. When I got up and got ready to leave, I sort of stumbled. And it must have been in such a way that alarmed the guys at the table, not unduly because they didn't make big stink out of it, but I stumbled and somebody asked me, "What's the matter, Rob?" So I said, "Nothing," but I was sort of, clearly I was disoriented. And a couple of the guys got up from the table and assisted me out the front door because I had started down one aisle, and then I realized that the car was not in that direction in the block. And as we were coming out, one of the guys said they saw me being led out of the front door. And one of the guys said, "Does this mean I shouldn't eat the corned beef?" And they got off a couple at my expense, a couple of jokes at my expense. But then I had to get in the car, and I just bought a beautiful cream-colored car, anticipating great nights ahead. And so I had to go down the 101, cross over to the Ventura exit, but keep on down and go down to Disney because that's where I was working, the Disney Studios. And I maneuvered all of that. But in the meantime, the stroke is happening. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know it. So I'm driving rationally, and everything was fine. So I got down to the studio, went upstairs to put my clothes on, and I couldn't get my pants on. I took off what I had arrived, I took the clothes off, my pants off that I had arrived at the studio with, and then I'm trying to get my feet into the uniform that I'm going to do these shots that we'd come in early to do. And I couldn't, I fell on the floor. And I couldn't get up. You know, it was that commercial, "Help, I've fallen and I can't get up." But I took so long that they finally called up on the phone and they asked me, where was I? Because I was supposed to be on the floor. And so I told them, they said, "Are you okay?" I said, "No, I'm not." So they all came running upstairs. And then after what seemed like an interminable amount of time, they called my doctor. And the doctor said, "Well, he's probably having," because they described my behavior. And the doctor said, "Well, he's probably having a stroke." So they hustled me in the car, and we were a short distance from St. Joseph's Hospital. They hustled me into the car, and I still don't know. And I apologized to Sorkin and Shlami, the director, for having let them down, because I really did like that role. And so we went over to the hospital, and that's when they admitted me. And they determined that, took tests and whatnot, and they determined that I had had a stroke.
Well, I understand you went through extensive therapy, and it's good to see you doing so much better. To know that. I understand you spoke at a conference in San Jose for the American Stroke Association, and so you're doing some work with them.
Well, I did at that
Yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
That stroke's 13 years old now.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that we hadn't talked about, The Lion King and the voice of Rafiki. Tell us about that. That was an exciting part, and I know a lot of kids enjoy that. The Lion King. I know my grandchildren do. How did you get involved with that project, and that kind of gave you a resurgence?
Yeah, well, I was sitting around with nothing to do. They called my agent and asked, could they see me? And I'd heard about the project, etc. I didn't know who was involved. And I'd heard that it was going to be not one of Disney's great cartoons. And so what I immediately thought, as an actor, I immediately thought, oh, they want me to play the Lion King. So, as I rhapsodized about that, they called and said, no, they didn't want me to play the Lion King. They wanted me to play the baboon. And the very name stuck in my throat, baboon? Who's that? Because I didn't know the character. He said, there's a guy called Rafiki. To cut closer to the chase, I went down and we started working on this character, trying to find him. And so I had to come up with a voice. And we searched around for a week or two, and finally we came up with this rather obviously fake island sound, island kind of voice that I had always screwed around with, trying to be funny. And the director liked it. So I began to pursue it. And as I got into it, I enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed playing that character. Because all of a sudden I was free to do or say anything. He was nuts. He was a shaman. And everything that I did made some sort of sense as we had set the character up. And so that's how Rafiki was born.